Taja. I'm the communications lead for CDD. I'll go straight into the program lineup and I invite Mr. Paul Osei-Kufuor. He's the programs manager for CDD-Ghana. He'll give us an opening remark. And then Ms. Clara Osei-Boateng from FCDO. They are the funders of this research report. She will also give us a brief remark. Paul.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I recognize the presence of FCDO, Africa Education Watch, the media gathered here, and all distinguished invited guests. So, somewhere early this year, CDD and Africa Education Watch entered into a partnership. And the focus of the partnership was to assess the medium-term targets or the performance of the education sector medium-term plan. So if you look at the education sector, they have a long-term plan, which spans 2018 to 2030. So it's aligned largely with the SDGs. But in operationalizing the plan, they roll it out on a 4-year cycle. So it's a medium term. So the first medium term started from 2018 to 2021. The education sector or ministry is in the process to roll out a new one. Sorry, let me take this one. So the education sector is rolling out a new one beginning 2022 to 2025. Then the third medium-term plan will start from 2026 to 2030. So the focus of this partnership was to assess the performance or the outcomes and the targets set in the education sector medium-term plan for the first medium-term duration, that is 2018 to 2021. We are doing this because of the belief we have in inclusive development and also gathering citizens' feedback to feed into policy making in Ghana. Let me mention that this work wouldn't have been possible without the support of the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. They funded this research project, and Africa Education Watch led the data collection exercise, drafting of the report with supervision and input from the technical team at CDD-Ghana. A little progress with how far we've gone with the report. We've done a briefing with the Minister of Education, and at that briefing represented the initial findings to the Minister. We had quite a lengthy conversation, and we promised him that when we develop the final report, we will get back to the ministry to do another final briefing on it. We are yet to do that, but already the Minister has a copy of the draft report, and he told us that he's going to use it to engage the team working on the next medium-term plan. We did regional engagements. It was partially a validation meeting and also a dissemination meeting as well. We did one in Ho, we did one in Kumasi, we did one in Tamale as well. So today climax the activities leading to the conclusion of this project, which is the launch of the report. And we are highly anticipating that you will get further inputs, discussions, and reflection from participants so that the basic education sector, which is bedeviled with numerous challenges, can receive policy focus and attention. I want to recognize again the leading role played by Africa Education Watch, the technical team at CDD, including both internal and external experts, view the report. And also the Ministry of Education, the district education offices, teachers, SMCs, and PTAs who participated in the study. So I welcome you officially to CDD on behalf of the management and board of CDD and Africa Education Watch. And we look forward to having a very fruitful discussion. Thank you very much. Anyway, my name is Paul Osei-Kufuor.
Also the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office of the UK as a governance advisor. I apologize for my colleague education advisor who wished to be here, but she's currently on her annual leave. So first of all, thank you very much to CDD and African Education Watch. We've been partners for so long, I don't even know how long through Star Ghana and currently directly and all of that. But we very much appreciate this effort. As Paul said, the partnership was concluded in January. So basically we had 6 months to pull all of these together. And as we all know, they've done a fantastic job. This project forms part of our Partnership Beyond Aid program, which, among other things, seeks to support civil society to monitor services delivery within the social sector. So essentially, education, health, and social protection. So this particular project focused on education. And I must say that this intervention is very timely, as Paul said, because one, it's assessing one phase of our medium-term education sector medium-term plan. And so it's very relevant in the sense that the inputs or the recommendations which is coming from this report will be used to inform the next phase of the plan. But also importantly, we've been through difficult times with COVID and all of that, and we do know the impact that COVID had on our social sector, services delivery, education, and all of that. So I believe that this report provides us some real fact about the impact that COVID has had on education. As we know, and again, Paul already alluded to that achieving increased access to education and improving the quality of education in Ghana is very critical to Ghana achieving the SDG. CDO is proud to be associated with this work. So as we've gathered here to listen to you and also to engage with policymakers, because I believe that in this room are some representatives of government and other agencies that have responsibility to work on the recommendations. We believe that each one of us will pick what is ours, and then we'll go back and work on it and ensure that in the next phase, at the end of the next phase, most of these recommendations would have enriched the outcomes and that we will have better outcomes. So thank you so much, and I'm happy to be here to participate in this discussion. Thank you.
I believe we are all stakeholders in education in Ghana. We couldn't invite everybody, so we are streaming this event live on all of CDD Ghana's social media pages. So your colleagues and others who are not here, we are hoping that you'll be able to tune in and join the conversation as well. And I invite Mr. Kofi Asare, who is the Executive Director for Africa Education Watch, to present the research findings to us.
Thank you, and thank you to all stakeholders here present. My name is Kofi Asare. I represent Africa Education Watch, and I want to start by, first of all, appreciating the role that the EduWatch team played in collecting data, analyzing data, the role the CDD team played in providing technical leadership and guidance in the compilation of this report, and all other stakeholders at the national level who played key roles in providing insights into the review of the medium-term plan. As Paul rightly said, there is an education strategic plan 2018 to 2030. And that plan is government blueprint for the education sector: basic, secondary, tertiary, TVET, inclusive education, all aspects of our educational system. So every activity government undertakes must situate within the plan, in the sense that there are objectives, there are outcomes that must be achieved within the period 2018 to 2030. So for us policy practitioners, we are normally monitoring the extent to which activities are actually leading to the attainment of outcomes and not necessarily activities. Activities are outputs, but they should lead us to some set targets, which must inform our next line of action. So this medium-term plan is the first 4 years of the ESP 2018 to 2030. And a new one is obviously being rolled out between 2022 and 2025. The objective of this activity, among others, was to ascertain the extent to which the basic education aspect of the education sector medium-term development plan 2018 to 2021 recommendations to policymakers with the aim of improving attainment levels for the next medium-term plan. Data was collected in 15 districts across the country, and in these 15 districts, we collected data from 60 schools. And in each of this, and in addition to that, we also collected data at the national level through stakeholder interviews and then a review of the MS data system. MS is the Ministry of Education's MIS, or how you call, that's their statistical base. So data used for planning education, reviewing education policy is normally grounded or collected within the MS system. These are the districts that we collected the data in. I mentioned earlier that we did it in 15 districts. There's a mix of rural and then also urban and peri-urban districts. So you find Accra, you see Lankwantanan, you see Adenta, you see the East, and then you see rural districts like Idra, Setredumase, you see Sefia, Kontombra, etc. So there's a mix of both rural, urban, and peri-urban districts. We collected quantitative data mainly dwelling on MS and other sector review reports that had quantitative information. We collected data, qualitative data through interviews with key stakeholders, the community, the school, and also at the policy level. And then in each, and then we also collected data from secondary sources through reviewing of relevant sector reports or reports that reviewed the attainment of some of the targets that we reviewed. MS data we dwelt on was for the period 2017 to 2021. Now, what did we monitor? If you are conversant with the Education Strategy Plan, you realize that there are about 35 or so indicators. Not all of them have targets. Not all of them have measurable targets. So not all of them have targets, and not all of them have measurable targets. But we limited ourselves to key indicators of quality, equitable access, and then finance and management. So 90% of the data we are going to use here emerged from the Ministry of Education's own MS system, not from us. So these are the items we track, or the indicators of quality and access we track. Kindergarten enrollment, primary junior high school transition, junior high school completion, gender parity, proficiency in maths and English, trained teacher deployment, participation of parents and school management committees in school governance, Captivation Grants, the new curriculum, BCE performance, school buildings, sitting and writing facilities, ICT facilities in school, textbooks, electricity, wash facilities, water and sanitation and hygiene facilities. And then we also track financial accountability and basic education financing. So the findings are arranged in line with the 3 key themes of the medium-term strategy. First theme is improved equitable access to and participation in inclusive quality education at all levels. These are the themes in the medium-term plan. So we have arranged the findings according to the themes in the medium-term plan. Second is to improve quality of teaching and learning, including in STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And the final one is to ensure sustainable and efficient financial management and accountability for effective service delivery. So we go straight to findings in respect of the first theme. KG enrollment. Net enrollment at KG simply is the rate at which we enroll children at the age of 4 in kindergarten. According to our education policy, every child who is 4 years should be in kindergarten 1. And that is the right. Children at the right age ensures that they do not drop. Yes, that over 8 children who are enrolled. And so KG net enrollment target education sector development plan. Target was to attain a target of 94% by 2021. By 2021, we reached 74.6, and we indeed made progress 2017, and by 2021, but not hitting the target 4%. So for equitable access, it's net at KG, and we did not meet the targets. We lost the target by about 4 percentage points. Now let's urban dynamics. And again, the analysis of this report is done such that we have a picture of the national situation, and yet another picture, districts that are deprived and districts that are endowed because of the equitable or inequitable issues that confront the education sector. And it is for no reason that the target or the theme was equitable access. Let's see how this achievement played, in deprived and endowed districts. In the district, it was 83.6%. All children are being enrolled at the right age in rural areas or in the district. So that is the main picture in the district. Let me indicate that 21 MS data on deprived and endowed districts for net enrollment was not available for analysis, and so we relied on the 2019-2020 data. But it indicates that more children enrolled at the right age in deprived communities than at the level, which is a good indication because we have had problems with enrolling children at the right age in school in rural communities. Primary high school transition is one of the key indicators of equitable access. Ghana signed on to the Development Goals Pact, and one of the targets is to ensure that by 2030, all children of basic school going age enroll and complete the full course of basic education. And basic education in Ghana obviously includes primary, KG, and junior high school. So if you enroll in KG and you are not able to complete junior high school 3, you haven't attained universal, you haven't attained basic completion. The target is to achieve universal basic completion. In line with this international commitment, we set a target for primary junior high school transition to 99%. Now, this is why transition is important to analyzing completion within the basic education system. Ghana's basic education system is fragmented, as I told you. There's KG, there's a primary, and there's GHS. So not all KGs have primary schools, and not all primary schools have junior high schools. That is why it's important to measure the transition, because transition is not seamless. The target was to ensure that 99% of all who enroll into primary 1 are able to move into junior high school 1. And this is the measure, primary to junior transition. By 2020, again, we didn't have reliable data on this particular indicator by 2021. But by 2020, national attainment was 92.5. That's about 7% or 6.5% below the target. But in deprived districts, most importantly, by 2020, 18% or close to 18% of primary school graduates were not making it to junior high school 1. That's almost about 1/5, which has been the trend for about 10 years or 15 years. So it means that in deprived districts, and I'm talking about 75 deprived districts, in deprived districts, we are still having issues with about 1/5 of students not being able to cross the bridge between primary 6 and junior high school 1. What could be the reason? Now, I'll take one region, one deprived region, to give you a bigger picture of the situation in the deprived districts. Northern region is one of the deprived regions in Ghana. In Northern region, the rate of transition between primary 6 and junior high school 1 by 2020 was 72%. It has the lowest. It means that close to 30% of students are not crossing from primary 6 to junior high school 1 in Northern region. Okay? And let's see why. Next slide. The reason is that about 60% of schools in Northern region do not have junior high schools. 60% of primary schools do not have junior high schools. So only 40% of primary schools in junior high schools have junior high schools. We know how scattered Northern region is. The distance to school, the distance commuted to school averagely is highest in the northern part of Ghana, because communities are sparsely located. And so in a situation where only 40% of primary schools have junior high schools, you are actually prolonging the distance committed to school, and you are creating more avenues for children to drop out, because as they walk and walk and walk, they get tired and then they drop out. The situation is not peculiar to Northern region. Across the country, there are about 4,000 primary schools without junior high schools. There are about 15,000 primary schools, and there are about 11,000 junior high schools. So 4,000 of primary schools do not have junior high schools. You graduate and then you drop out. No, please go back. I just want to hammer on it. Now, even though there are 4,000 primary schools without junior high schools across the country, the burden is much felt in the deprived districts, because 57% of that burden is located or felt in the deprived districts. All right. So in a school like Takulugu in the Zabzugu district, where we collected data, this is what one of the teachers said. Usually the primary school graduates have to apply to other junior high schools for admission. The learners buy as many forms as they can, and then they write an entrance exams into these schools. When selected, some of these children walk for about 10 kilometers to school each day. People are applying for admission in junior high schools, and they are paying between 5 cedis and 10 cedis for the admission, because there's no junior high school in their school. So let's see how this is affecting junior high school completion. Don't forget, this is where basic completion is attained. This is the target, the global target, basic completion. Target is 92%, and this is the percentage of students who complete junior high school after entering junior high school. 83% is completing by 2021. So this target again was missed, because the target was 92%. And we are at 83%. It means that up to 17% of students who, after all the struggle of trying to get admission forms to apply to junior high schools where there are none, and commuting for 10 kilometers every day, after all that, 17% of that number drop out between junior high school 1 and junior high school 3. Okay. Gender parity. Gender parity, obviously, proportion of girls to boys in school is one of the indicators that we have done significantly well. Ghana actually achieved this target as far back as 2020, 1 year to the finish line. And this is obviously as a result of interventions put in place by government and development partners in communities to ensure that girls' education is prioritized, and then also strengthening the support for girls' education across all levels. So we have done tremendously well in the area of ensuring that the proportion of girls to boys in our schools at the basic level is equal. In rural areas, the situation is not too different. It's just almost like the national level. And this target has been met throughout, from KG up to junior high school. Okay, so that is great. Go back. Another target is the percentage of school classrooms that require major repairs. There was no target specifically for this indicator, but you can see that between 2016 and 2021, by 2016, 22% of our classrooms required major repairs. But as of 2020-2021, this has reduced to 20%. So marginally, we have improved. The meaning is that 20% of our classrooms still require major repairs. This is not repair, major repairs. And this does not include schools under trees. Schools under trees, they don't have a classroom. They are under a tree. So these are existing classrooms that are dilapidated. Please, the 20% is not schools, it is classrooms. So if there are 3 classrooms in Medina number 1, it will be 3 classrooms, not 3 schools. Thank you. So I was asking one of my colleagues whether this was counted as a classroom needing major repairs. We're not too sure whether this was a classroom needing major repairs, or because you can't repair this. You can't repair this. So I'm sure this is not part of it. All right. So we are delving into the realm of infrastructure, which is very, very critical to equitable access, quality, etc. Okay. So one of the schools we said was, this is a junior high school. So you pay to, you write exams to get admission to this school. Yeah. All right. Let's look at infrastructure. Infrastructure is one of the most underserved areas in our basic education system. And stakeholders will appreciate that we keep hammering on the neglect for basic education infrastructure every year, especially since we started a free senior high school program, which is taking significantly a huge chunk of resources in the education sector. Now, the targets for infrastructure, to begin with, were not realistic. The targets were not realistic in the sense that it didn't reflect the infrastructural needs in the basic education sector. They were very, very, very cheap targets that could be met, for want of a better word, lazily. Okay, so even though we exceeded the target by 236% in KG, 216% at the primary level, and 197% at the junior high school level, the targets were cocoa targets. Why am I saying so? In junior high, at the KG level, don't forget that we have a target to ensure that about 90% or so of children enroll at the right age. It means you need to build more kindergartens, and we did not meet that target. Okay? The meaning is that you are not building enough KGs. Now, so let's see look at the target. The target was to build 336 kindergartens in 4 years, divided by 4. And you realize that if you divide it by 4, you arrive at about 90, right? About 90. If you are building 90 KGs in a year, if you divide it by 261 districts, it means that the number of KGs per year per district is less than 0.3 a year. The whole 336, if you divide it by 261, it means that every district in Ghana did not get more than 1.5 KGs in the entire 4 years. So it's cocoa work target. Target was unrealistic. Same for the rest. The only one where the average was 1 is junior high school. Junior high school is only where we had 1 junior high school per district. But 1 junior high school per district the whole year, it means that, remember we said we needed 4,000 junior high schools. So if you are building 1 junior high school per district per year, it will take us about 18 years or more to attain parity between primary schools and junior high schools. By that time, we would have missed out of the sustainable development goals. So, yes, targets were met, but the target was unrealistic. And one of the recommendations we made in this particular report is to ensure that government set realistic targets. Realistic in the sense that they respond to the needs of the basic education system. Not realistic in the sense that there's a small money we have for basic, so we can only do this. No. And I was having a discussion with Uncle Charles before we came here that I was reviewing the Get Fund formula for this year, realized that about 15 million has been allocated for basic education infrastructure. Then I asked myself, how many basic schools can 50 million build? Almost, just less than 50. 1 kg is about 500,000. One primary school is about 500,000. Junior high school, 400,000. 1.4 for your complete school. You can't build 50. So divided by the number of districts, it means that, so let's go ahead, let's go. So we have to set targets that are not just realistic in terms of how much we have given to basic education, but realistic in terms of its responsiveness to the needs of the children in Tintimshe. Students sitting ratio and student death ratio. Very, very important ratio. Every day, the media, especially, you have been going around and reporting about students lying on their bellies, sitting on stones, and not writing on desks. Yes. What you have been reporting is actually a symptom. There's a broad picture. The broad picture is that this ratio is supposed to be 1. 1 means that the ratio is 1, and it means that every child should have access to a dual desk. So 2 people sit on 1 desk. We have a ratio of 1. Baseline, 2016-17, 30% of our children did not have access to desks and seats. This was in 2017 at baseline. As we speak in this year, the number has actually increased to 40%. So we have increased the number of children who don't have access to desks from 30% to 40%, even in areas where timber is abundant. In Ejura, in Sefia Kontombra, you go there, children are sitting on stones, on stools, some are standing. And there's timber. So we have just not met the target here, but we have retrogressed below the baseline, and we need to do a lot of things here. Okay. Availability of facilities. Here we look at electricity, urinal, water, and toilet. We have made a lot of progress in expanding access to wash facilities. About 15 percentage point increment in almost all the key facilities. And this is very, very good. I know there's been some intentional effort to ensure that schools that are constructed have wash facilities and all that. So we are making progress to the extent that at the national level, about 75% of our schools now have toilets, facilities, and water to almost 75%. But the target is to ensure that 100% all schools have access to toilet. We still have about 25% of our schools not having access to toilets, facilities, urinal facilities. And we have about 40% of our schools not having access to electricity. For me, that's the most important thing here. Because STEM is one of the key agendas on government's, plate. But you cannot have STEM when 40% of your schools do not have electricity. You can't have virtual labs. You can't teach robotics. You can't teach computer. You can't teach 21st century and all the beautiful things we talk about every day. You can't transform education using ICT when 40% of your school do not have electricity, especially in a country where total electricity coverage is more than 80%. So if more than 80% of Ghana has electricity, why is it that 40% of Ghana our schools do not have electricity? We are building schools in areas where there is electricity, but there is no electricity in the school because we've not recognized the need for electricity. So this is one key area that we have to improve, the electricity connectivity in our schools. And in deprived districts, as you can see, only 51% of them have electricity. So about half of schools in deprived districts do not have access to electricity. They cannot have a computer laboratory. They cannot take part in the 21st century transformation we are talking about. We must emphasize on that. Next slide. So let's move to our STEM and our quality. Quality is key. All we mentioned are access is more or less a means to an end. The end is that after entering school, you have to come out with certain, learning outcomes as a measure of the quality of education that you received after entering school. So this is where the key issue is. Now let's look at BEC. BEC pass rate. Let me indicate that scientifically, as a development researcher, it is not. Let me put it this way. You cannot 100% compare BEC results over the years. Okay. And not just BEC result, but every examination result. Because every examination comes with its own stress levels. If you last year, that mass day. It's not only BEC, it can be in the university. You understand? The fact that I had first class 21 years ago in UCC doesn't mean that your first class today is the same, because there are so many factors. But we still have to compare, because we have targets and we need to measure our performance. Our performance must encourage us also. Baseline 2016-17, the national BEC pass rate was about 76%. Okay, but as of now, 2021, we are at 75. We have actually declined. If you look at the bars there, in 2017-18, we went to 76, more or less maintained it, and then we came to 75, 76, 75. So we haven't improved significantly compared to the baseline. We have actually declined. But the good news is that in the deprived district that we sampled, this is not all, in the deprived district that we sampled, we saw significant progress there. And that is why I want to emphasize that whenever we tell the story of deprived districts, it's not that we are telling a story of Golgotha, a place where you have gone to die. No. We are not just telling a story about a hopeless situation. We always tell a story of a place where, given investment, things can change. Let's go to the next slide. We realized that over the past 4 years, in the deprived districts, we actually recorded an appreciation in the pass rate from 64% to 68% in the deprived districts we sampled. So it means that BEC performances have actually increased by about 4 to 5 percentage points in the deprived districts. And in the endowed districts and municipalities, rather, it has actually reduced from 87 in 2017 to 81. The meaning is that in some of the deprived districts we sampled, something good is taking place there. And so the fact that, and so given their neglect, if resources are made available to them, monitoring is strengthened, so everything is strengthened, something good can come out of those places. I give an example. In Ejura has one of the highest BEC pass rates in Ghana. Ejura's BEC pass rate is higher than Adenta, higher than Lankwantanai, higher than... It was the highest in all the districts that we surveyed. Okay. But Ejura is one of the poorest and one of the 75 deprived districts. Ejura, situated Dumasi. Tisha Kontombra, average BEC pass rate, about 88%. Now, what is Ejura doing? Ejura, for example, the assembly will normally engage retired examiners to come and train the teachers in the district, train them on how to teach the students on how to answer questions to the expectation of examiners. They do about 3 mocks in the final year alone, about 3 mocks, not just the genius mocks, but 2 extra mocks. So there's a feedback mechanism between the examiners, the teachers, and the students. So when they go and write the BEC, they are not afraid. They are not afraid. They know how to answer the question. So Ejura is doing well. So we didn't meet the BEC targets. Another target was proficiency in maths and English. This target is difficult to measure because as of now, we don't have the national standard test results out. That could have been the best way to measure it. We did a test about a year ago. We are waiting for the results last year. But the last time we had something similar to the national standard test was in 2018, when we had the national education assessment. The NEA test is normally used to test proficiency levels in maths and English within our primary school system, especially. The target was to ensure that by 2019-20, at P4, 30% of our students are at least achieving the maximum proficiency levels in maths. And then English, 45. Okay. And then in P6 2, the target was to get proficiency levels at 32% in maths and 44% in English. Now, in 2018, there was an NEA assessment. And in that assessment, in primary 4, only 19% achieve proficiency level in maths. And in primary 4, only 25%. In primary 6, maths was 22% and English 25%. So we didn't meet any of them. It tells you that as of 2018, less than 25% of our students in primary schools were proficient in maths and English per the NEA results. We hope that this improves with the NSC test that was done last year. But the standard there is not good. It's not good. So that is in respect of the maths and English proficiency levels. They were not met by 2018. The most significant achievement of this government since the medium-term plan was rolled out is in the area of teachers. And it is significant and at the same time unprecedented. We have seen an intentional effort to improve teacher quality in terms of the percentage of teachers trained, and that is commendable. The target was to ensure that by 2021, we have 75% of KG teachers trained, 84% of primary school teachers trained, and 96% of junior school teachers trained. What is the status quo? At present, 91.9% of KG teachers are trained. So from a target of 75, we're actually at 91. At the primary level, we've trained 95.7 instead of a target of 84, exceeded. Now the junior high school level, the target is 96, we are at 96.8, exceeded. So in all aspects of, if you look at the graph, is it red or orange? The orange graph is the attainment. You see that we are way above the target. The target is the gray line. My color tone is not good. Whether it's ash or gray, I don't know. But they are friends, right? The gray line, and then you see the orange line is the attainment level, and then the blue line is the baseline. So we are way up there. This is very, very good news. I'm surprised you are not clapping. But you see, improving the quality of teachers must reflect in the learning outcomes, right? Okay, so we have to see this affecting learning outcomes. But why didn't we see, for example, a massive improvement in the BC? It means that between the quality of teachers teaching, learning, and learning outcomes, there is something wrong. Let's go to the next slide. Now, and indeed, it is not just an area that government has done well, but it's an area that also in deprived areas, we've seen the percentage of teachers trained go up, synonymous with the national level. And that is why it is significant. In the deprived areas, for example, we have about 96%, averagely 97% of teachers trained, averagely, between KG, primary, and junior school. It's even higher than in endowed district we sampled. In endowed district we sampled, we had 96%. We had 97% in the private district we sampled. So the picture looks good in terms of the quality of teachers, i.e. percentage of teachers trained. But let's look at how their delivery is playing out. Let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about the deployment. A target is to achieve pupil-teacher ratio of 1 teacher is 35 children in KG, 1 teacher is 35 at primary, and 1 to 30 at junior high school. This is the number of students that a teacher will teach. The number of students or pupils a teacher handles. Pupil-teacher ratio. The attainment level as of 2019-2020. We didn't use 2021 data here because in 2021, the definition of a teacher changed in the MS system. We'll talk about that later. So we used 2020 data. But the good thing is that by 2020, we had exceeded the target. Because the PTR target for KG was 135. We were at 127. So teachers were handling lesser students than averaged or than targeted. At primary school, it was 126 against 135. And junior high school, which is the most significant, we reduced the pupil-teacher ratio, or we actually met the target and exceeded. We have now reduced it to 1 teacher handling 12 students in junior high schools. We've done tremendously well. But you see, if you go to a school like Mafidugame, in Central Town, as of last year, there was one teacher handling the whole junior high school, 1, 2, 3. But we've done well here. So that is why we always have to do the equity analysis. That as you have reduced the number of teacher per people by dividing the total number of teachers employed by the number of students, how is it affecting the classrooms, especially in rural areas? Let's go to the next slide. Urban areas. So on paper, there are 12 students being handled by one teacher in junior high school. These are 5 districts in Accra here, and we know all these districts. Okay. So let's compare the pupil-teacher ratio to the class size. Let's start from Wejagbawe. If you divide the total number of teachers and then the student, you get your PTR of 19, which is good. It is higher than the national targets, and the national attainment were 12. But it's okay, 19 is still within the target of 1:30. Fantastic. But do the class size analysis and analyze the class size, and you realize that an average teacher is handling 72 students in junior high school. Okay? Because, and I'll explain to you why. So in Wejagbawe, even though there's a teacher ratio of 19 per junior teacher, each teacher is handling an average size of 72, the class. 60 in Adenta, 69 in Gawes, Bonkatwan 68, and then Ghana 66. So the reason is that in the school you have so many teachers. So when you divide them by the number of students, it reduces. You get the small number here. But you have very few classrooms. So you go to a classroom, one teacher handling 70 students. And other teachers are hanging around. You don't have spaces. In these districts, in these municipalities, we've not increased the number of schools for about 10 years. The population has almost increased by 35% between the 2010 and 2020 census. But in these schools, we have not added. Adenta has added only one school, for example, Adenta. So we are not expanding the number of schools. So there are teachers, yes, but there are no classrooms to teach. So only one teacher can teach at a time. So huge class sizes affecting the quality of teaching, learning. The new curriculum, next slide. The new curriculum is supposed to use a participatory learner-based pedagogy, activity-based. How can a teacher undertake an activity-based learning with 75 people in a class? It's not possible. Because if you go to EB Presby, you can't walk in between the rows. It's not possible. The last time I went there for Adom TV, the distance between the teacher's desk and the first row, there was no gap. The teacher was more or less part of them. So you can't do anything. That's the situation. So on paper, we have more teachers, yes, but in reality, there are very few teachers handling large class sizes because of the limited infrastructure. Classroom without teachers. Now, this is how the teacher issue plays out in urban. Let's go to rural. In rural districts, the issue is about teachers not accepting postings to rural areas. It's still a problem. 15 or 16 years into free, compulsory, universal basic education. But as of 2020, there were 100,500 teachers teaching in 92,000 primary schools across the country. If you do the analysis, okay, and you take out the fact that each primary school will need a head teacher who will not teach, take them out, analyze the rest, you realize that we had a surplus of about 8,000 teachers. If you take out the head teachers, okay, we have 92,000 primary schools. So take out 92K, the primary schools, no. If you take them out, the head teachers out, teachers remaining, divided by number of classrooms. Because primary schools, they do class teacher, it's one teacher per class. You find that we had 8,231 teachers who were surplus. But as we speak, in the deprived areas, there are about 5,429 teachers needed. There are 5,429 classrooms in deprived districts which do not have teachers. The last time, and I'll keep saying, if you go to Adenta, there are 18 primary schools, but there are about 260 teachers. How can 260 teachers teach in 18 primary schools? 18 primary schools. But 260. Adenta has more teachers than Zapsuku. Zabzugu has 3 times the number of primary schools as Adenta. So, we have improved the quality of teachers, but we have not improved the equitable distribution of teachers. Next slide. ICT facilities. I mentioned that electricity is not available in 40%, so they are out of this analysis. The remaining, okay, so half of the schools visited in the districts. 65% of the schools in the schools visited had ICT facilities. Majority of them were located in the district. That's 50%. Okay, but only 38% of the ICT facilities were working. Only 38%. Computers in Boedibe 5 years, 10 years, and so that it doesn't work. So only 38% of the schools had ICT facilities. And out of this 38, only 15% were located in the private districts. It means that we have a lot of work to do in terms of extending ICT facilities, to our schools, especially in the private district. But even in urban districts, only 38% of the schools are working, have working ICT facilities. So that's one area we need to improve. Next slide. And I'm ending my presentation. I'll talk about financing. Everything we are discussing here is a function of financing and management. Poor management of teaching will lead to poor learning outcomes, among others. Poor financing will definitely generate the situation we are seeing. So let's see the key issues in financing and governance. We start with SMCPTAs. Yes, the target was to ensure that all schools, 85% of our schools have SMCPTAs functioning. We all know school management committees and PTAs. Government has changed the SMCPTA thing, brought in a new policy, and then we now call them PAs. So teachers are not part of the PTA again. So it's now Parents Association. We realize that yes, SMCs are available, but then they are not functioning as a unit. It's normally one person, the SMC chairman, taking decisions for the school. Now, because government has decoupled the parents from the teachers and now calls the PTA PA, the absence of teachers is not helping in the organization of the parent-teachers organization, because the PTAs were mainly organized by teachers in the communities at the basic level. So their absence is not working well for the function of the PA. We need to have a framework for their participation and strengthen their. Rather than that, there won't be any accountability check on SMC. Note that SMCs are now the boards of our basic schools. If you look at the tertiary law that was passed last 2 years, the tertiary education law, SMCs are the management unit of our schools. So community members, CSOs at the community level must demand accountability from the SMC. And one of which the bodies we have is the PA. If the parent association is not working, we can't have accountability oversight over the SMC. So it's very important for us. Second issue at the basic level in terms of governance and participation and financing is Captivation Grants. As we speak, we know the story of the Captivation Grants. It's been in arrears for several tranches and several years. And it is not an issue. It's not an issue because, it's a familiar story. But the Captivation Grant is not getting to the schools at the right time. We must all be worried about that. How has government financed education in general? International standards dictate that all governments in the world should commit between 4 and 6% of their GDP to education. In Africa is the second highest contributor of GDP to education. We are averagely about 5%. We are second after the EU. International benchmarks again dictate that government should commit at least 20% of total public expenditure on education. These are the two benchmarks. So let's see whether we are committing enough resources. I have heard a narrative that in the past 4 years, we have committed the highest in terms of investment into education. The data here will show. Now, the blue graph is the GDP line. By 2017, baseline year, Ghana was committing and this is data from the Ministry of Education, not our data. Ghana was committing 5.4% of its GDP towards education. Not basic education, 5.4%. It has been reducing since then. by 2020, it was 4.6. So we've reduced our percentage contribution GDP to education from 5.4 in 2017 to 4.6. In 2012 or so, we were doing 6%. So, and let's look at the public expenditure. Again, at least 20% of our public expenditure must go into education. How do we have here? Baseline year was 21.2%. Then in 2018, it went up to 23%. Since they have been coming down, we are now at 17%. So it is not true that we are committing more to education today than before. No. In 2011, 2012, we were doing about 30% of public expenditure. That was when we were doing 6% of GDP. So it's not true. We are not committing enough to education. We should be committing at least 20% of our expenditure or up to 6% of our GDP. So we are actually declining in terms of public expenditure allocation to education. So what should we do? The first thing we need to do is that the Ministry of Education must develop, the Ministry of Education must stop approaching education with the straight jacket system, where we are delivering textbooks everywhere, teachers everywhere, same criteria. No. We should acknowledge that some people are more equal than, some people are lower than others. Others are advantaged. So the criteria for deploying resources must change. There must be an affirmative action guiding the deployment of education resources to the benefit of deprived districts until the time that they will come to a level of endowed districts so that we can have a fair grounds for deploying resources. Now, we are saying that for this to happen, the ministry must develop a framework called a purposive rural education framework, where we are going to have a department, let's say a department for rural education, okay, solely targeting deprived districts. That's the 75 deprived districts. You are going to have different policies for these 75 districts. Different policies. For example, every school constructed in this district will have to have teachers' accommodation because teachers are not going there. Post them, they come back. So every school constructed in these areas should come with a full component of teachers' accommodation. Okay? So the fact that you build a school in Adenta and you don't add a teacher accommodation doesn't mean that you do the same thing when you are building a school in Shamba, in Nanumba North. No. So it is this policy that will say that for this 75 districts, if you are constructing a school, in the design of a school building, it is integrated or it is integral that there must be accommodation for teachers. Second is teacher motivation. The salary of a teacher who is teaching in Mekukrum cannot be the same as the one teaching in Adenta. No. International best practice, average 20% is given to teachers who are teaching in rural areas in many countries as rural allowance. In Ghana, if you teach in Hang or Canton, you get the same 2,000 Ghana. If you teach in cantonment here, the same 2,000 Ghana. So why would somebody go to Hang or Canton? We must have this framework that will differentiate between how much teachers in rural areas are remunerated, how they are remunerated. How teachers are supervised should also have to be determined differently for these areas. Even in the disbursement of Captivation Grant. So we need to have this framework, different framework, legal and policy framework, and institutional framework for managing education in these areas until it gets to the point where they get parity. Similar to what Kwame Nkrumah did for the North. He introduced free secondary education there. He didn't aim to discriminate, but it was an equity measure. We need such things because the state of education in the deprived district can only get to the level we have at the national level if we have an affirmative action like that. The MS data we are using has issues. It doesn't cover all the indicators that the government itself has actually put out in the MNE framework of the medium-term plan. So for us to be able to measure our progress in the medium and then within the 12-year education strategic plan, we need to have MS data capture all the indicators in the medium-term plan so that we can have a basis to measure our performance. So MS data will have to be reviewed and expanded in scope. Data credibility also emphasized. We know the issue of infrastructure. We need a comprehensive infrastructural plan for the education sector. Of course, a separate one for the deprived districts. And this plan must take into cognizance the distance committed to school. GES has a policy, and Charles is here, he will tell us, that children should not travel between 2 and 5 kilometers to school. That's the policy of GES. I think at the KG level is 2 kilometers. The highest is 5 kilometers at the KG, junior high school level. So no students should travel more than that. That's the distance between schools. We should be guided by that in situating schools as appropriate. Every approach to provide junior high school education for primary school students should not defeat the policy where no one should travel more than 5 kilometers to school, whether you're in urban areas or in rural areas. So we need to have a responsive infrastructural plan. It's very, very important. In Ghana, the decisions that goes into the siting of schools is not determined by a plan. It's determined by influence. It's influence. It has to be by a plan based on data. The second one, so the first set of recommendations were the systemic ones, not the policy ones. Someone says, I don't like the Minister of Finance. The Minister of Finance is the cause of 90% of our problems, so I can't replace that with anything else. The Ministry of Finance is not releasing the GET fund, even though we are paying GET fund every day. You pay VAT, you pay GET fund. So where's the money? Last year, out of 1.4 billion allocated to GET fund, last year, by the end of the year, only 98%, 98 and committee, only 48% was disbursed. 52% undisbursed. Last year, everybody paid VAT. You pay VAT, you pay VAT. You pay VAT, you pay any child, you pay GET fund. The money is not coming. This is after GET fund had been securitized, partially, and also capped at 25%. So last year, GET fund money that was released was only about 600 million instead of 1.4. Basic education disbursement, only 25 million out of 66 million. That's why we are not building schools. The number of infrastructural projects that have been abandoned between 2017 and without GET fund, you can't expand infrastructure because that's the main source of education infrastructure financing. So the finance ministry must first uncap the GET fund. The capping is making sure that the ministry is able to take education money to other sectors. It should bring education money to education. And let's fix our problems here. We need a uncapping. And I'm happy that after all the noise we've made about this thing, I saw in the GET fund report, the Parliament's report on the GET fund for this year, the first recommendation of Parliament was that the finance minister should uncap the GET fund. It is causing too much troubles. At the RCC level, it's difficult to understand why you have timber and we don't have deck. We have a plan. It's a plan. Our role as citizens is to ensure that from SMC at the school level, so that resources that go there are utilized properly to the benefit of education. And we need to streamline how schools are absorbed into the GN system. I'll emphasize on this. There are religious bodies that have constructed schools, especially junior high schools, but they've been chasing government for 2 years just to come and absorb it. Take the first school to go free. It's a problem. In those days, it was decentralized, something that was done at the district level. But now it is centralized. So they have constructed the school, especially in the Ashanti region. But the process is cumbersome. So we need to streamline this and make it much more easier for people who have constructed schools, who want government to come and take the schools, especially those bodies, to hand them over so that we can have more junior high schools because we need 4,000 of them. So that process has to be centralized. In conclusion, we have made significant progress in the area of teacher quality, and we have made good progress in achieving gender parity. We've also made a lot of effort in ensuring that more and more children are enrolled in kindergarten at the right age. However, we need to improve equitable access to education at the basic level. We need to strengthen primary junior high school transition. We need to increase the number of children who are completing junior high school and the number of children who are crossing from primary to junior high school. But this cannot be done without adequate funding for basic education infrastructure, because without infrastructure at the junior high school level, there can't be any equitable access. And this cannot be done without ensuring that every classroom has a teacher. And so our call to government is that in the next medium-term plan, which I'm told is almost ready or is almost being finalized, government will prioritize financing education at the 6% GDP level and at least 20% public expenditure level, and committing at least 50% of this funding to basic education. The only way you can strengthen the quality of secondary education and tertiary education is to strengthen the foundation, which is basic education. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, I believe we can do much better than that. We all know how Mr. Asare is really passionate about education in Ghana. As I indicated earlier, we are all stakeholders in education, and I don't know what you make of the findings and the recommendation that the team put together. But to get a few thoughts from our panelists today, I'll invite Portia Gabo to take over from here.
Thank you, Ifwa. Now, Ghana's education sector medium-term development plan had three main objectives. One, to ensure that there is quality and effective inclusive education at all levels, improvement in the teaching and learning of STEM at all levels, and also adequate financing of education service delivery. The question is, were these targets met? What do we need to do to ensure that no child is left behind, and what do we need to do to adopt strategies for the next phase of the development plan? Let's begin this conversation. Let me first introduce to you our first panelist, Dr. Vera Ahen. She is a senior lecturer and currently the coordinator of teaching practice and project work unit of the College of Distance Education of the University of Cape Coast. Her academic interests span the fields of educational psychology and guidance and counseling. She has a good blend of academic and community-based experience on the manifestations of quality learning in the lives of children and adults alike. She's conducted training and research on education-related issues and has 18 impressive publications in peer-reviewed journals. She holds an MPhil in guidance and counseling and a PhD in educational psychology from the University of Cape Coast, Ghana, and Kenyatta University, Nairobi, Kenya, respectively. Let's welcome Dr. Vera Ahen. Our next panelist is Mr. Charles Ahatsu-Chega. He's worked with the Ghana Education Service since 1985, during which he served in different capacities, rising to the position of Deputy Director General, responsible for quality and access, and Acting Director General. He's also worked in the Ministry of Education as Planning Officer, Acting Director of Planning, Budgeting, Monitoring and Evaluation Division, and later as Coordinator of Development Partners and Resource Mobilization. He's also worked with the consultant and officials from the Ministry of Employment and Social Welfare to prepare a national human resource policy. He holds a Master of Science degree from the University of Bristol in Development Administration and Planning, and a Bachelor of Arts and Diploma in Education from the University of Cape Coast. He has a postgraduate certificate in comparative education from the Royal Danish Institute for Teacher Training in Denmark. He's received training in development evaluation organized by the World Bank and Carleton University in Canada, and in developing innovative policies in science and technology from the United Nations University in Maastricht, the Netherlands. He's retired from public service as Executive Secretary of the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment in the Ministry of Education. Currently, he is an independent education consultant in education administration and curriculum development. Let's welcome Mr. Charles Ahatsu-Chega. Last but not the least is the researcher himself. Mr. Kofi Asare has over 17 years of experience in the education sector of Ghana, working with schools, communities, international organizations, and government agencies. He's chaired the Ghana National Education Campaign Coalition, represented civil society on the Ministerial Advisory Board of the Ministry of Education and education sector working and technical committees, and played key roles in the development of previous education strategic plan, ESP, that's from 2010 to 2020, as well as the current one, 2018 2018 to 2030, Mr. Asari has consulted extensively for local and international organizations in the education sector, including the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Agriculture, National Service Scheme, USAID, ILO, teacher unions, WUSC, Comfort, World Bank, AFDB, Danida, GIZ, among others. Let's welcome Mr. Kofi Asari. We now begin this conversation, and let me first begin with Dr. Vera Ahin. First of all, your initial thoughts on the research. The microphone.
Hello?
Hello. Okay, thanks, Madam Portia. The name is Portia. Thanks, Madam Portia, and welcome. I welcome all of you to this function, and I would want to find out if we have the basic education division of the teacher education people here. The GES basic education division. Do we have representatives here? They are not here. Okay. Well, the findings are very relevant at this crucial time. And we all know that when we are building and the foundation is not strong, the building will definitely collapse. And basic education is the lifelong, or the foundation for lifelong learning and the development of humans in every country. And if we are not able to have a solid foundation, then what are we projecting, or which level of students are we bringing to the secondary school? And from the secondary school, what caliber of students are we projecting to the university? So I'm very much happy that the team or the sector they sampled was the basic education, not secondary or tertiary or anything, but basic education, because we need to get the foundation right before we can able to progress to the next level.
Getting the foundation right. Mr. Chega, one of the strategies adopted to improve upon quality education was reforming the curriculum. It's been 3 years now, and teachers and pupils still do not have textbooks. The national standardized test, there's been 6 months now, we still do not have the results. Can this process be effective?
Well, let me begin by saying good afternoon to everyone, and congratulate FCDO for providing the resources for something that I call a very historic event. In fact, for anybody who has followed education in Ghana, this event is very historic because it is the first time we are reviewing a medium-term development plan. We've never done it before. And the interesting bit of it also is the fact that since the ministry changed the strategy for reviewing education performance, for me, this particular review comes as a very independent presentation that I believe the donors will use to look at what the ministry itself will present as its own performance review when it calls for its National Education Week. So that is where I want to start from. And you talked about the curriculum. Clearly, the curriculum has to be reviewed regularly, routinely. And it comes with a lot of resources. I think the challenge we have, and again, the review just demonstrated it. Once you have not been able to structure how you want to support education, even when you put up a new curriculum, you can't provide the additives. And that is where we have the challenge. Because by and large, there are significant challenges in terms of resourcing that really undermines what has to go in to ensure that the curriculum is supported through the provision of teaching and learning materials. I think that we are going to make progress. We've heard quite a lot that the target dates for the delivery of textbooks have been shifting from one date to the other. So hopefully, the little I heard recently is that some progress has been made and that the books will be coming out hopefully before the end of the year. But I don't know how they would serve this process. So there is indication that things would work out.
Now, Mr. Sari, you did hammer extensively on funding at the basic level. Funding at the basic level received just a quarter of what was given to secondary education. Are we investing in secondary education, free SHS, at the expense of basic education?
Let me clarify that it is not. So the quarter analysis was for Get Fund, okay? Get Fund disbursed 100 million to secondary and disbursed only 25 million to basic. And they didn't just disburse that last year. Secondary was actually allocated 74 and they give them 100 over disbursement of about 35%. And basic was an under disbursement of about 64%. But if you look at the entire education sector envelope, basic education is getting about 40%, and second cycle is getting about 24%. But the standard should be basic getting 50%. Because basic has about 7 million learners, secondary has only 1.2 to 1.3. I agree that secondary education is expensive because it is heavily burden-based. Yes. But I also agree that in delivering education, you need to allocate your resources in a manner that does not ensure unbalanced growth. Okay, so if you take into cognizance the loans that have been secured, mainly for secondary education expansion, you will come to the conclusion that we are investing, but secondary education is a priority. Okay, but it shouldn't be so. Education should be the priority, not secondary education. And that is why we are saying that if education is a priority, the foundation must be the topmost priority, which is basic education. And the only way it can be a priority is that your funding, your wallet, must demonstrate that it is your priority and not your pronouncement. Once we have basic education being adequately funded, we are having at least 50% of the government's public expenditure public expenditure going into education. And we are having about 6% of our GDP being invested in education. We will see that there will be at least appreciable amount of resources to provide schools, for example, in where schools are taking place under trees, and also a lot of money to ensure that textbooks are procured much faster, and other key, essentials for quality and access improvement.
One of the targets of the Development Plan 2018 to 2021 was to improve the quality of teaching and learning of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Now, in deprived communities especially, we do not see that extensively because they do lack the infrastructure. How do we address these shortfalls when, for example, I may donate computers to a particular school, but there's no access to electricity? That community has not been connected to the national grid. Teachers are now being compelled to draw computers and mouse on the chalkboard. How do we address this?
Thank you. I think we need electricity to connect computer to. And like Uncle Kofi said, Ghana has now covered about 80% of electricity nationwide. And if some deprived communities are still lacking electricity, then it means we are not working. So what we can do is schools that are deprived community, that have electricity around their locality, we should make conscious efforts to get them electricity. Because without electricity, we cannot improve our ICT learning. But with STEM, I don't think we need so much electricity to develop STEM. And the analysis shows that there is a little bit improvement of STEM at the basic level. But yes, so they are lacking behind. So we need to put in more effort so that the science, the STEM, science, technology, mathematics, and engineering should be promoted at the basic school level. I think we need a lot of electricity there.
Mr. Chega, how do we also address the widening gap between primary to JHS transition? For example, 20% of pupils are dropping out between primary 6 and JHS 1 between rural and... Would you attribute this inequity to the straitjacket policy implementation?
Well, that is a very interesting point, because the issue about transition is very dependent on a number of factors, but the greatest one has to do with the attractiveness of schooling. Now, interestingly enough, over time, the lack of infrastructure has undermined the whole desire for transition, because, as rightly said, if you have only 40% or 60% of primary schools that have JHS, 40% in the north that have JHS, then if people graduate from schools without JHS, where do they go? So the whole issue of having to move from one community, and these are scattered JHS, is not in. So we need to begin to bridge the gap. When we started with KG, we had a national policy that said that we should add every primary school must have a KG. Very determined, dedicated policy, and it was followed. But we started JHS before we started talking about KG integration, but we have still not been able to do the things that will ensure that we have parity between primary schools and JHS, which will make it easy for the transition. And I would dare say that some of the challenges that we are having today when it comes to Kayaye is also a function of the whole transition infrastructure challenge that has actually strangled the movement from primary school to junior high school. So there's a lot of work that government will have to do in terms of reducing that gap by providing a lot of support for primary schools in the rural areas, so that we can bridge that gap. Because there's a clear indication in the review that our deprived districts are improving in terms of education. They are improving. The data showed that when you look at even the issue of access, you have a lot of children in deprived areas wanting to go to school, a lot of children passing the BECE. So clearly there is a way out which, if we take advantage of, we can lift up the level of education to other levels and ensure that every child gets opportunity to quality education.
I'm glad you said every child gets the opportunity to quality education. Mr. Asari, it looks like we've neglected children with special needs and children with disabilities. The schools are there in endowed districts, but sometimes you're being told your child is not potty trained. So other instance, he or she is being denied access to education. Have we focused or have we neglected children with special needs and disabilities?
Our inclusive education policy has seen very little backing with resources. We still don't have assessment centers adequately to be able to detect at an early level disabilities. Teachers have been waiting in doing assessments at the school level. Even for the specialized schools. Our special schools are running as charitable organizations. We know that. You see every day there are people are donating stuff to them. Our approach to special education has been generic. If Captivation Grant delays for regular schools, it delays for special schools. So I think that within the context of our inclusive education system, we haven't found the government was supposed to commit 2% of the education budget into inclusive education. The last time the review was done by NEC, it was nowhere near .something%. So again, we have a beautiful inclusive education policy, which when implemented would ensure that there's much inclusivity within our education system.
We even launched a manual last month.
Yes, we are still doing manuals. What is required is the funds to implement the implementation plan. And until we fund that plan, we won't have an inclusive education system. But I am saying that we have to have a different approach towards people with special needs, and also, including schools in the private districts. They all have special needs. If we don't bring them up to the level, of the national, up to the level of national schools or schools that exhibit national characteristics, everything we do will be inequitable. The foundation is unbalanced. So let's have a much more purposive approach to those with these peculiar needs, both at the special education level and also in the private districts, until they get to the level where we can accord them the same level of attention as regular schools or schools in endowed districts.
Dr. Ahin, how do we also address the infrastructure gap? So the schools are there, furniture is absent in the school. Do we have a system in place to ensure that infrastructure is in place for effective teaching and learning?
I think everything rests on funding, because if there is no money to be used to build schools, they cannot do it. However, I think during Doris' time of 2002, they were building schools known as Pavilion Schools, which were less expensive. It was like a wooden structure something, and then they used it to accommodate students. And those Pavilion Schools are no longer there, like the one Rakofi showed to us. We don't even know whether it's a classroom or a shelter. So if there is no money, I think government can go back and look at constructing Pavilion Schools for students or pupils, for pupils to sit under. It's like, in fact, when I was coming, I came with some samples of the Pavilion Schools as if I knew. Yeah, I will be asked. Wow. I've left it in the car. How it looks like. It's constructed nicely, like a wooden structure, but very airy, and then it can accommodate a lot of people in the classroom. So we should go back and then to the drawing board and construct Pavilion Schools, since we don't have money or findings to construct enough schools. Without classrooms, in fact, inadequacy of classrooms is a major factor that students or pupils are not performing. Because if the child is unable to get a place to sit in the classroom, no furniture. I went somewhere at Nadoli, and the classrooms, even there, the classrooms were there, but there were no furniture, no desks, no chair. And then they were squatting on the floor. Some were lying down and then writing. And how do we get enough from such a child? How do we assess the child to perform better in class? So all centers, the poor academic performance, all centers of lack of infrastructure, and we need to work hard to finance that aspect.
Talking about education finance, and Mr. Chega, what are some of the innovative ways to finance education at the basic level?
I'm happy that Kofi raised the issue of looking at education financing through an equity perspective, which in fact will address a lot of the challenges. Interestingly, the education strategic plan before the one which is 2018 to 2030, there were some recommendations about even looking at the PTR. You see, if you look at the cost for paying teachers, and you reanalyze the PTR and increase the number of children per teacher, not to 72, but let's say you make primary school 40 children in a class and make JHS 35 children in a class. What you have done is that you have increased the number of children per a teacher. Now, when you do that analysis along the line, you would see that if you take the number of students, you will have everybody covered. But rightly said, it is not just a simple function of a teacher per certain number. The actual challenge is in the classroom. But if you are able to do a required PTR, you can clearly reduce the number of teachers that you can recruit in the education system, and therefore you can manage your teacher recruitment arrangement and ensure that you have the numbers that you need that will certainly be able to support the children. And that's one. The other one has to do with resources getting to school timeously. That's an expression that we have been using. If you send capitation grant to schools after the term, I don't know what message you are trying to send to the teachers. And that is a very serious matter. Besides, there have been a lot of suggestions that we should begin to look at an equity arrangement around the whole financing for schools. So you have the capitation grant, which is based on per capita. But you must now have a certain grant allocation that looks at equity in terms of this school is in a rural area, so you get capitation grant plus the equity grant, or maybe you might even call it an equalization grant, and say that, okay, so you have two resources, or your school is in Nima and there are critical challenges in terms of children accessing. We will give you some amount of resources so you can raise up your what we call the enrollment drive. So you are always looking at the education system strategically and allocating resources strategically. But it's very clear that as it is now, we are not making any serious progress. We are actually coming back. We are falling short of international benchmarks for GDP allocation to education. We have also nationally fallen short of our own commitment to providing about 30% or more to education, and now we've come down to close to 21% of education of spending for education. So we need to take a new look at it and prioritize education. That is what has been stated in the education strategic plan. The minister says they are looking at it through the lens of learning outcomes. Learning outcomes require money, and it's time we began to put our money where our mouth and head set.
We also have with us here representatives from WAEC, Ghana National Association of Teachers, National Schools Inspectorate Authority, NACA. And let me first begin with the representatives from the Ghana National Association of Teachers. Is there any rep here? Yeah, exactly. You've heard these challenges. How are they directly affecting you?
Thank you, my sister. I think listening to Kofi is done very well. But I would want to isolate one particular area. And that has to do with teacher motivation. Normally, when we talk about teacher motivation, what comes to the mind of everybody has to do with money. But it goes beyond money. Yes, the money aspect is there. But if a teacher walks into a classroom and you have your children neatly dressed, there are tables and chairs, you have the teaching learning resources. Even if a teacher is deployed to a community and the community accepts that particular there are forms of motivation to the teacher. And I believe that such a teacher will feel that he or she has been accepted in the community. And when you are accepted and you have all that it takes to go about your teaching in the school, you say you'll be able to deliver as expected. But most of the times we are challenged with some of these things. Like you talked about, some form of allowances for teachers in deprived areas. This thing has been in the drawing board for a very long time. I'm happy that we are made to understand that a form of report has been brought. Let's see how the duty bearers are going to pick up this particular issue and make sure that it really works. If we do this, at least we'll be working to make sure that teachers give up their best and the quality that we are all looking for will be achieved. Thank you so much. In fact, from the NAT perspective, we think that continuous professional development of teachers is key. And because of that, every year we embark on continuous professional development of teachers. But of course, we don't have enough resources to be able to cover a lot of teachers. And let me quickly indicate that this year, from the 3rd of July to the 23rd of July, we are going to the Brown Afro region, the Northern region, the Upper East region, and the Upper West region to embark on continuous professional development of some teachers. That is our contribution.
So how are you coping without having textbooks for the new curriculum?
It's a challenge. It's a challenge because these are things that our teachers need to be able to teach effectively and efficiently in the classroom for us all to get what we want. So it's a challenge. We want to appeal to the duty bearers to make sure that, yes, we've heard that some work is going on. I read in the Daily Graphic and I was told that in about some 2 months' time and the 3rd month, these textbooks are going to be brought out. Let's hope that it works. But not until we get this, it is difficult for us to believe. Even though we have read it, it's difficult for us to believe. I must be very honest with you. Thank you.
We also have here with us a representative from WAEC. Yeah. Now, my question to you is, I've done countless stories on persons with special needs writing the basic education certificate examinations. Right, you give them extra time to complete their work. Sometimes there's a computer, but there are some children with special needs who feel it's high time you grade them differently. Do you think it's high time we grade people with special needs?
One point, the issue about special needs. Yeah, true. We have special arrangements. We call them special candidates with special assessment needs. That's what we call them, not special needs candidates with special needs. So, before every exam, we send information around every school. That's even now we have even built it in the portal. The portal, the online portal we use for registration, that you indicate. So there's a combo, drop-down combo, a whole spectrum of special arrangements that they should request. So, but what we are realizing that from time to time, there are new requests that keep coming. It's not like about the previously where we have arrangement for the blind. Now they say they call them visually impaired, or those with hearing impaired and that kind of thing. We have special arrangement we make for them because it's, when it comes to English language, we exclude them from oral English. They don't write oral English because the person cannot hear. So how does it assess the person? And when it comes to the blind, whatever, we don't assess them in English, mathematics, and science because of the diagrams. And I'm hearing that now there are software where can make arrangements. And even the blind, as I speak, there are some schools where they are blind, but they can't use Braille. They are blind, they can't use Braille. We make special arrangements for them. And now the new trend is about some candidates who require special assistance in terms of scribes. Somebody to scribe the thing for them. And some of them too, they do oral tests and we record the responses and we transfer and we grade them. So we have a whole array of arrangements that we make for them. As and when they come, we deal with them. And we are always in constant touch with the special education division. And they from time to time also bring a whole lot of requests for us. So it's not only about time allocation that we deal with, because it's not everybody who needs time. Because there are times they will tell you the candidate cannot sit for long. It doesn't really need more time. All they need breaks. You cannot sit for more than 30 minutes. So after 30 minutes, 10 minutes break, walks around, comes back and continues. So that's it for now. We do a whole lot of arrangements in support of the candidates with special assessment needs. Thank you.
Now, let me come back to our panelists here. Mr. Asare, the next development plan, what are the 3 main targets or objectives that you want to see in?
The first is that there must be an intentional effort to achieve parity between the number of primary schools and junior high schools. The second is that we want to see a policy for rural education targeting deprived districts, the 75 deprived districts. A policy that gives preferential, or if you like, that positively discriminates for teachers, infrastructure, resources, the quality of supervision, and all inputs required in the deprived. And then the third is to see Ghana committing 6% of its GDP to education, 20% of its public expenditure to education, and 50% of the education sector allocation to basic education. Thank you.
Dr. Ahin, the same to you. What do you want to see in the next education sector medium-term development plan?
Yeah, what I want to see is first the division for basic education, that the GES should be involved. Because if you look at their mandates, they have a lot to do. If you look at their mandate, they have a lot of roles to play in the development of basic education in the country. It's like these funding should go directly to them because that is their unit of basic education. Whatever the findings or the research has revealed, they have to take it very serious and then work with it because they are supposed to supply textbooks to schools. They are a unit for GES in charge of basic education. They are supposed to supply textbooks to schools, see to it that the deprived communities are on board. They need whatever is needed at their basic schools. And then they are also supposed to monitor and then evaluate the performance of the basic schools. Then number 2, I want the Ghana Council for Curriculum and Assessment. I don't know whether it's a division or whatever it is. They are here. It's a council, Ghana Council for Curriculum and Assessment. Yes, in fact, whenever we change curriculum, one of the recommendations was that they should make sure that textbooks are available before they roll out a new curriculum. But then, whenever we bring a new curriculum, they should make sure that that curriculum fulfill its course or it gets to saturated, and then they want to change, and then they should evaluate it before it changes. Because if they don't do that, and each time another government comes, they will be having this problem. But if the curriculum is allowed to run its course, then if it has not come to its end, there will be no need for change. So they should come into agreement with the Ministry of Education, and then though the length, the number of years that a particular curriculum should run is for 10, 20 years, then they will not be able to change.
We have a representative from NACA around. Is there? Yes. Want to respond to?
Yeah, the issue, please.
Yeah, I'm saying that your curriculum should run its full course. So if you have maybe projected 10 years for a curriculum to run its full course before it changes, then you should have a policy for it. Like, for instance, this standard-based curriculum, for how long should it run before it can be changed? If there are policies or mechanisms in place for that, then it will be difficult for somebody to come and say, okay, I'm no longer in power, so standard-based curriculum should be changed, and then I'm bringing this one. When it happens like that, it is the grassroots that suffers. It is the students and the pupils and the teachers who suffers. But when there's a mechanism in place for your curriculum, it cannot be changed. Because there's one of the recommendations that before it's changed, there should be textbooks available. The needed equipment should be available before we change a curriculum. So what mechanism do you have in place so that each curriculum that changes has run its full course before it can be changed?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think in terms of review of curriculum, I think it is for a period of 5 years. Yeah. And then also, so that is after every 5 years, then it has to be reviewed and then revised if necessary. In terms of NACA making sure that textbooks are in place before we roll out the curriculum, what I can say is this. If you look at the act establishing NACA, it spells out the mandate of NACA, that is to develop curriculum and assessment standards. NACA is not in charge of book development. So when we are done with the curriculum, then it is left to the publishers to take the curriculum, and out of that, they develop the textbooks. So what I want to say is that in terms of book development, it is not the mandate of NACA. Ours is to develop the curriculum standards and that of the assessment. And then the publishers will come in, develop the textbooks, bring them to NACA for assessment and approval. When it is done, then they can go out and then sell the books to the general public. So that is what I can say for now. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Now, let me go. You want to respond? Okay, continue. Should we roll?
Okay. Should should we roll over a curriculum? Let's say, should we begin using a curriculum before textbooks are provided from your house? Because you don't provide textbooks. So when you put the curriculum to the public domain, then is it a mandate for the schools to start using that curriculum, or they are supposed to wait for textbooks to be available before they start using the curriculum?
Yeah. The issue we can look at it from two angles. Like I said before, our mandate is to develop the curriculum and assessment standards. When we are done, the publishers, I get in the point, we take it from there. They develop the textbooks, and then they bring it to NACA for assessment and approval. So as it stands right now, the textbooks that have been developed, they are in the, the textbooks that have been assessed and approved, they are in the market, people are selling them. I get in the point. What happens is that in the public schools, it is the responsibility of government, in this case, Ministry of Education, to procure some of the textbooks that have been developed and distribute them for the public schools. That is the what do you call it? The arrangement. So, like I said before, NACA, as it stands right now, we have done our part of developing the curriculum, and then the publishers have taken over from there. They have developed the textbooks. They have brought to NACA for assessment and approval. And then, like we said, government right now, we all heard from the Minister of Education not too long ago that he has contracted some publishers, and then they are in the process of bringing the books out. So
for you, it's an issue of mandate. It's not your mandate in answering her question.
If that's what you want to say.
Yeah.
No, Mr.
But I understand. Yes, legally, yes, NACA doesn't procure textbooks. But legally, NACA has an obligation to advise on the curriculum imperatives. If you review the National Curriculum and Assessment Framework, okay, NACA in its own framework admits that for this curriculum that we have developed, you require textbooks to teach in. Okay, so if you recommend to government that this kinky cannot go without a fish, government knows from the onset that we can't start serving the kinky without a fish until year 3 before we give you fish. And that the experts who designed the curriculum designed it with the expectation that for the teacher to be able to implement this standard-based curriculum, adapt participatory pedagogies, learner-based pedagogies, and all the beautiful words in the National Curriculum Assessment Framework. 1, the teacher must have a class size of not more than 35. And 2, must have ABCD. So the imperatives to ensure that your curriculum works, obviously, is part of your advice to government. So that is where we want to emphasize, and not necessarily the procurement or development of textbooks.
Now, Mr. Chega, let me conclude with you. The top 3 things you want to see in the next development plan.
Well, in the next development plan, I want to see clarity in the definition of accountability. Now, that is the missing link in all of this, and that is why we have all of these challenges, because it looks like the polls for who is accountable for what keeps shifting from one place to another. The same thing that we are having now with NACA. I mean, people are holding NACA. Why is it that there are no textbooks? NACA does not bring textbooks. So we need to get clarity. In fact, if you look through the ESP, there is no definition for accountability anywhere. Kofi, I don't know if you have found a definition. Tell me, because I can't find it. I can't see it. But in the objective, which is the third critical objective, is accountability in education service delivery. And that wise, I also want to see that there is proper clarity in the division of labor in terms of education delivery. But this current centralized system of running education from the Ministry of Education is becoming problematic, and that is what is creating all the problems. A lot of people, when I say this, they say you are biased because you come from GES. I say, yes, I'm biased because I come from GES, not only for that reason, but by the law. I mean, the law provides that the GES has a responsibility, and the GES must be seen to be delivering its responsibility. Other than that, you can't hold them accountable. So teachers are walking about. The ministry says it's literally trying to run after teachers, and the GES is sitting down with arms folded, and they are watching. And the ministry people are running left, right, center. They don't know teachers, but they are running after them. So we are having serious problems with accountability relating to division of labor. There is also the segment that has to do with the role of district assemblies. It is there, it's in the law. District assemblies have a responsibility in the law to support education in their district. A lot of the things, we've heard a lot more about Ministry of Education. Nobody has mentioned assemblies. But assemblies have a role, particularly at the basic primary level, basic education level, to deliver certain critical aspects of it. That one will have to be clarified, and we should set targets around those ones to show that we are really interested in improving education by ensuring that everybody is doing their part and nobody is doing somebody's part and taking glory for it, and then government is still paying somebody for somebody who is doing his work. So those are the kinds of and again, the other one is Kofi mentioned it. We need real standards for emit data. We need real standard, because a lot of it, we could have had better information in this review if the data was fine. And it all ended in 2020. We don't have 2021. For all you know, in 2021 it was very, very horrible. But we don't know it. We can't see it. We can't analyze with it. So we need some of those critical things to help us to account to the people when it comes to education, which in fact also means that this whole issue about PA, PTA is very problematic. And if the ministry itself wants to run the PAs or do something with the PAs, it should give it some guidelines or framework for it to manage.
Thank you, Mr. Chega. It's now time to hand over the microphone to you for your questions, views, suggestions, recommendations. Kindly raise your hand. You mention your name, your outfit.
I'm Klaus Ebwatin from the British High Commission. Kofi, your findings on the funding was quite interesting. Seeing a decline from 5.4% of GDP to 4.6. Just opposing that against conversation about free SHS being a huge burden on the public purse, I was actually expecting to see an increase in our spend on education. I know the focus of this was not to go into it, but I'll be interested to see, break it down to see how much of it actually goes into basic education as opposed to secondary education. Because perhaps what is actually happening is that we are actually squeezing primary education, sacrificing standards in basic education, of course, to deliver our flagship free SHS. And I think that conversation, I am really interested. Probably not here, but I'll be keen on whether you have to show the distribution in the sector. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I think we do have. I mean, I mentioned that secondary is getting about 24, basic is getting 40. Basic should be getting averagely 50. You know, in 2008, 2009, secondary was getting 9.8. Basic was getting 55. Since 2009, basic started declining gradually from 55, and now we are at 40. And it shows in the outcomes. So I think, again, in relation to that, what we must do is that in the analysis of financing, normally the ministries, education and finance, they don't add the loans. So the financial analysis you see doesn't include the loans. Okay? If we add the loan, for example, the IDA, Free Senior High School alone, we've taken about $1.5 billion. That's about 10 point something million Ghana cedis to expand mainly free senior high school infrastructure. Some went into financing some aspects of basic and TVET, but majority of the funds has gone to free senior high school infrastructure. That loan is the single largest loan I've ever seen in the education sector, $1.5 billion. And that is why we securitize part of the GET fund. So if you watch last year's GET fund allocation, 60% of GET fund went to pay off, to service that loan for that year. That was about 600 million. This year, to a similar amount, is there. That's why we are getting little to this verse. So if you add the loans, you will see the real impact of free senior high school on the financial, architecture. So we will begin to do a lot of work to try and get all those things and add, so that we have a comprehensive picture of financing.
Mr. Chega,
Yeah, I think the other dimension is that if you see the results from the use of the money, then that would enable you to take a breather in terms of, oh yes, this is a result that you can count. This is evidence of the effective use of the money. But if you take close to $1.5 billion loan for education, and we cannot see anything in the education sector, but then you come back and take the small money that we have contributed to pay for that loan, that is where the problem comes. So that's the whole dynamic when it gets into leveraging our resources. Is not particularly a bad idea. I mean, we don't have money, we have some collections, we go and borrow somebody's money, we want to build 500 schools, we build them. We show it to people and we see the real progress, and that probably helps to literally balance off some of the issues.
Charles, the leveraging issue, the challenge we have with the leveraging issue is that, you see, GET fund ordinarily should have been giving us about 5 to 6 billion a year if it wasn't capped and if it wasn't securitized. Okay, listen very well. But you have capped it at 25%. And you have securitized it for $1.5 billion loan. So we are now, last year, we only had 1.4. Now, if you look at the cost of the loan you have gone to secure, this is a 20.5% fixed interest bond, 7-year fixed interest bond, 20.5. So when you add the cost of the loan to the transaction cost, which this year was about 15 million Ghana cedis, then you ask yourself, so if we did not securitize GET fund and the regular inflows came, if we ended up disbursing the receivables, wouldn't we have been better off? That's the question you ask yourself. Because you have used your future revenues as security to go and take a loan. The loan too is not coming to you once. It's also been a year you got 1.5 to 1.5 billion Ghana cedis. You understand? So if you look at the cost of this leveraging you're talking about, it sometimes doesn't justify securitizing your future revenues, to provide that infrastructure.
I don't know whether it's a shade too late in the day, but my understanding is that in curriculum development, you would want to engage key stakeholders. I'm not sure whether WAEC, industry, and even some parents were engaged, at least from Christian education perspective. If you are going to develop curriculum, you will need to engage key stakeholders. And I would think that education is education, and therefore, you need to engage kids so that there is that connection. Listening to talk about this is where our mandate ends. I was just thinking aloud that, okay, yes, we are talking about practical things and things that will deliver quality at the end of the day. So I don't know whether going forward, whether it's late in the day or not, or sometime to come, because really we are talking about the aspirations of the country and delivering skill sets that should feed into the economy. So you don't have a situation where we are doing something, but you produce a mass of people who then don't have the skill that we need to feed various sectors. So maybe this is a food for thought. The second thing that I want to talk about is teacher quality. Now, you mentioned teacher quality, and I was excited. The question is, years ago, I think, during the old A-level days, you would be there, and then some people will come and sit in the class and be, looking at the way the teacher is teaching. I don't know whether this is happening now. I heard continuous professional development. My understanding is that if you are going to have training or continuous professional development, you should speak to certain gaps that we may have, detected, so that we are seen to be very targeted in what we are doing. Thank you very much.
Our rep from NACA would want to respond to, were you able to engage stakeholders?
Of course. Mr. Charles has been executive director for NACA before. And then, yes. And then curriculum development, it goes through a lot of processes. And then one of the key things done has to do with stakeholder engagement. And then I can say, and then Mr. Charles can bear with it, that it was done extensively. That is what I can say. Thank you very much.
All right. Any more questions?
But for the stakeholder engagement, yes, they did extensive stakeholder engagement on the basic education, the basic school one. I know the secondary school, the senior high school curriculum has been developed by a team. They've been working for months. But normally the approach is that they will have something as a draft before they come and engage. Others will prefer that you start rather by engaging, mobilizing opinions before you start. But that's perhaps the approach that they want to use. My problem with this engagement is the value. Is it NACA or Ministry of Education? Ministry of Education places on engagement. Because in the last engagement on the basic education career, we were happy. They listened to what we said, but they wouldn't take it.
Yeah.
Majority of the opinions at Nat Hall, Bedia Hall that day was that wait until you have textbooks before you roll it out. Before the elections, not shame, you roll it out. And now you are in year 3, no textbooks. You see, so when you elicit opinion from citizens across the country, don't just elicit, but please listen. And don't just elicit content-wise opinions, but then the implementation arrangement. There was an issue about French, and I mentioned at that forum that if we don't put in place measures to make sure French teachers are sufficiently available, and we continue to implement the new curriculum, make French compulsory, how you are going to do is that you are going to deepen an already existing divide, because already only about 35% of our schools are teaching French. Those who are in the north, they are not part of this. So what measures are you putting in place to ensure that as you emphasize more on French, you are being inclusive? Nothing was done. Before we woke up, they rolled it out. So please, engage, yes. But listen to some of the things we say, because some of them are important not to widen already existing gaps between rural and urban, education attainment levels. Thank you. It's not you, it's the ministry, I know.
Yeah, I think that in the submission of, Reverend, he touched on the continuous professional development I talked about. Normally, what we do is that, remember, NAT is also a professional association. And before we come out with our continuous professional development training, we try to identify the areas that we think our teachers have some challenges in. And we get experienced teachers who would come and patch up those gaps. And that is what we do. So we are conscious of the fact that now we are emphasizing on the standard-based curriculum. So these are some of the things that we do, so that at least when we do that, and the teachers then go into the classrooms, they are able to impact as expected. So these are the kind of things that we do. And this particular arrangement, we've done it for about 60 years. So we are doing that. So I'm just going to allay your fear that there's no problem. The rest assured. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. I also want to use this opportunity to thank Mr. Kofi Asare, Executive Director, Africa Education Watch, Dr. Vera Ahin, Senior Lecturer, Faculty of Education, UCC, and Mr. Charles Ahatsu-Chega, Education Consultant and former Director General of the Ghana Education Service. And of course, the real goal is to ensure that no child is left behind in terms of education in Ghana. Thank you so much.
Can we clap for our panelists and our moderator? So we have come to the end of the event, and I'll call on Mr. Kufo again to give us a brief closing remarks, after which the event will officially be closed. Copies of the report will be made available to everybody, but you can also visit CDD-Ghana's website as well as the website of Africa Education Watch to download it and share it extensively with others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mami. What else do I have to say? I think we have saturated the conversation. We've had a lot of discussions. But I also want to pick it from what my sister Portia said, that we shouldn't leave any child behind. But listening to the presentation, what intrigued me most was the fact that getting pupils enrolled at the right age, we are dropping by, I think we are doing around 90-something%. So let's say 10% of children are not being enrolled at the right age. Another point that intrigued me was also the fact that when you are talking about transition from primary to JSS, in deprived areas, if you take about 10 children, 2 do not transition to, from primary to JSS. And then when you talk about completion, in deprived areas too, when you take 10 children, about 2% do, about 2%, yes, if I'm right, 2%. So if you take 10 children, 2 of them do not get the opportunity to complete junior high school. So we are dropping 2 at the transition level, dropping another 2 at the completion level as well. This is quite revealing, and it's very informative for policymakers, something that we should work strongly on it. During the last election, it came up a lot out of school children. Their manifestos, they propose so many solutions. It's time for us as media, civil society to go back and look at the manifestos and see how it will reflect in the next medium-term plan. My final point that I want to make and conclude is also about the fact that Kofi made that assertion that educational outcomes is a function of management and finance. And my senior brother Charles also emphasized the point that the role of district assemblies quite critical to driving education and learning outcomes at the local level. We did a study quite recently, and you will be concerned with the findings that we had on our local assemblies. It seems that anything within all the services under their jurisdiction are not being delivered to the satisfaction either to the policy requirements or are not responsive to the concerns of their communities or citizens. And I think we should take a critical look at the role of district assemblies in education management. And finally, one more thing. When we're doing the data collection, there was a repetition of this point that there is difficulty enforcing sanctions at the local level. And there's a lot of complicity on the part of head teachers and education inspectorates. How do we transform this process in a way that there can be proper oversight and checks on teachers, head teachers, and the other actors delivering education at the local level? When you go to a hospital, we have a hospital administrator. So issues about logistics, you go to the doctor only when you want a diagnosis. We can look at a similar model in our schools and our communities, how we deploy education. So that we need experienced administrators to oversee the schools so that we reduce that kind of affinity between head teachers, because they are with them throughout and they become inspectorates and become head teachers. So applying the relevant sanctions become a difficulty for them. So it's something that I think I want to bring it up for us to discuss. Okay, on that note, I think I want to thank our panelists, also thank Africa Education Watch for leading this particular research project, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office for the funding as well, and to you all for gracing the launch of this report. I hope we can continue the conversation when we leave the event today. Thank you very much and hope to see you.